everyone. Thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartree here today with another episode of Presenting Champions. And today I am joined by a professional wrestler known as Peace. Today we are going to be basically taking a look into the life of a professional wrestler, including, how Peace started out, how he progressed through the world of professional wrestling, how he trains. And as always, there's going to be a little bit of mindset, a little bit of inspiration, as I always include in these interviews, about following your dreams and how to succeed in what you love doing. So there's going to be a few life lessons as well. So everybody stay tuned and peace. I guess I'll call you that for the for this duration of this. Thank you for making the time for this, and thank you for taking time out of your day. It's a pleasure to have you on here. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So I guess a place to start with this is the beginning. Now, I don't always do these in chronological order, but we will today. Your journey in professional wrestling, where did it start? What first inspired you to do it? Let's go back in time and talk about that a little bit, please.
Okay, well, I was a humongous fan of it. Growing up, started with the video game WCW versus NWO Revenge. Tremendous video game, and then I saw it on the television, and it was just it was brilliant. It was a blend of, I'd always been a fan of action movies, and this was something similar to that, but different. But you had these incredible live action stunts. The first things I saw were these guys in bright, colorful outfits, like launching one another over their heads and out the ring. It was Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero in a tag match, and Eddie launched Rey out the ring, and Rey did a front somersault over the top rope and onto La Parka, this big dude dressed in a skeleton costume. And on the same broadcast, you had I think it was Hulk Hogan and Sting being beaten up by three villains, and then suddenly Goldberg's music hit, and Goldberg made the save. And the whole thing, from the live action stunts to, in Goldberg's case, the music, the whole thing was I was a humongous fan. And then we mimicked it in school a little bit, and then I thought I'd give it a try. So I went to a wrestling academy, was not at all ready for it, and didn't hack it at all. And then I waited about 10 years to give it another crack. And again, really was terrible. Just life skills, social skills, confidence, just awful, just terrible. So it was, at the same time as learning to train to wrestle, I pretty much had to learn how to be a more confident, better outgoing person. So yeah, that was about 10 years ago now, at the London School of Lucha Libre. That was my second crack at it. And 10 years later, well, I've grown a lot as a person. I'm a lot more confident and much better in the ring as well.
Absolutely. Very good in the ring, and, very easy to talk to here. So it is a little bit surprising to hear about that shyness and that sort of nervousness that you went through. How did you overcome that, if you don't mind me asking? Because the reason I ask this is because obviously anyone out there going through the same type of thing, I mean, it's almost a bit of a cliche, but they can be inspired by the fact that you've overcome that. And this is something I like to do in these interviews, even though the focus is on wrestling itself. Was it just practice and just time, or were there other things that you did to improve that aspect of your life, if you get where I'm coming from with this?
Yeah, it was literally practice and time. And I wish I could give you a better answer, because I really can't, because this all was incrementally happening. I literally knew, one thing I can give myself credit for is I knew I really needed to be more confident in myself and not so socially awkward, and I was so nervous about everything. From when I was setting up the ring, I was petrified, I was terrified. If there was ever, I'm not great at spatial dimensions. Well, I wasn't so much then. I've gotten a lot better at it, but I was just like so nervous. Like, if I can't carry a board, I'm like, oh my God, I hope people don't see me and don't think I'm, completely retarded and stupid. And the pressure and nerves I had was just unreal. And I knew I have got to change myself. I've got to be confident, and I've got to relax, because this inhibits learning. I can't learn how to pick up stuff and set up a ring if I'm this nervous about it. So I knew that much. I knew that, like, okay, this isn't working. I need to be like that guy. look at someone like James Mason, who just puts his ring up with this ease and this confidence. In terms of getting there, I knew it in my head what I had to do, but the nerves didn't just go away. I wasn't able to control that. That's not something I could control. So it literally was just learning over time. I can't give you a good answer as to press this button, do this thing. I suppose put yourself in the situations at least. Don't be so nervous that you don't put yourself in the situations. That was something I did for a long time. And if I'd done it earlier, I'd probably have 10 more years left of a wrestling career. But as it happened, it was about relaxing. It was don't be ashamed if you don't know how to do something. Just ask. And if I could do it all again, instead of being like, oh my god, I don't know how this board goes on this place, I would just say, oh, I don't know how this works because I've not set up this ring before. Show me once. And if you're in that calm state of mind, you can be shown once and you're more likely to learn it. Previously, I learned it inhibited the learning because of how nervous I was. So yeah, it's just about practice. And it's hard to answer because it didn't happen as quick as I would have liked it to. I was still having lots of situations where I was not confident in myself. And I don't have an answer as to how I was able to get to the place, other than I knew I had to.
Mm. Well, it makes sense, and these things are always a process, first of all, so that stands to reason. But also, in all honesty, I appreciate you sharing that actually, because obviously it is personal. And when I do these interviews, I never want to pry into people's personal lives, but at the same time, as I mentioned, the inspirational aspect is always there. So the fact you've overcome that, it shows other people can as well. Moving on to the process of wrestling itself, you've described well, this process that you went through. You went and had to go, you backed away, you went back again, and obviously at that point it started to work. So flipping it on its head to more of a positive, at what point did you realize, actually, I'm getting good at this? Actually, maybe I can take this a long way, or maybe at least a little bit further than I thought, if you get what I mean. What was the process of that development where you really started loving it and really started getting into it, if you get what I mean with this side of things,
Well, I'm never entirely happy with my work, and I'm never entirely satisfied with where I could be. But I suppose when I first went on the holiday camps, because this is the first time that you're actually being paid to do it. Not much, but still, just the fact that you're being paid and people want to see you performing. And it wasn't that I was ready enough to give it a bash, but I wouldn't say that I was the best one or the most qualified one out of the class at the London School of Lucha Libre. I just happened to have the time to do it because these, if you do a holiday camp run at Pontins, as I did, you're doing it every day during a half term or an Easter holiday, where and a lot of people can't do it because they're doing their 9-to-5 job. So I was just lucky enough to be able to have the time to be able to do it. But when once doing it every day, I mean, the first couple of weeks were not great. Again, setting up the ring, I was a slow learner, but that was cool because they were patient with me. They said they appreciated that I made an effort. They didn't just say, "Oh, screw him, he's useless, he can't put up a ring, forget him." They told me what we like is the effort. We don't care how long it will take you, but we want to see people make an effort to at least put the ring up and down. And that put me at ease. So that helped with that. I mentioned before the anxiety. Obviously, being told that helps because it's not so cutthroat, do or die. But yes, doing that and the reaction I got, because I worked villain for the first 4 weeks. And then the 5th week, they made me what we call a blue eye, a good guy. And it really worked. The people really got behind me. So, after getting big reactions and big cheers, that's when I realized, okay, I'm not a bad talent. I can get people to cheer me. I know how to get people behind me and emotionally invested in matches. So yeah, that's when I thought, okay, there's something to this.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic answer, by the way, because once again, it shows that even for people who've achieved some big things as you have, it starts with baby steps. You know, it's not always easy, and again, it's a life lesson that is applicable to anything that people have their heart set on doing. You know, so that's always the theme that runs through this. Before we go forward in time, I'd also like to ask you a little bit more about the training aspects, or the London School of Lucha Libre. Fantastic name and everything. What the sort of training and what the lifestyle is like there, because with this interview, obviously, I'm trying to ask some questions for people who know a bit more about wrestling, but some for people who don't know as much about how it works behind the scenes. So hopefully cater to both sides, we'll see. But with that in mind, can you share with us a little bit about what a day in your life was like at the London School, and anything? I don't have a really specific question, but anything you'd like to share that you feel that people may be interested to know, really.
Well, the lifestyle would vary from each person. Some people were just natural. Some people had backgrounds in gymnastics or breakdancing. They'd come in and they could do maneuvers, no problem. I was not a natural. I was terrible. But I knew I was terrible and knew that in order to get better, I'd have to train regularly. London School of Lucha Libre, it's closed now, but at the time it was a wrestling school in Bethnal Green, and it ran almost every weekday. It ran from Mondays to Thursdays in the evenings. So I would go every day, at least 3 times a week. And in addition to that, I went to a school in Harlow. There was one in Swanley I went to in Kent. Once I learnt to drive, I drove up to Leicester to Brookside School, and I just did it as much as I could, just because, again, I was not a natural. So it benefited me to basically just repetition, just keep going at it. But I mean, yeah, and the lifestyle there was, it was, there wasn't any sort of sign on to a program. It was just show up and pay per session. I happened to binge on it. I really dove in head first and gave it everything. Some people might just show up once a week. Again, some people are just more natural, better at this. It comes easier to them. Some people just showed up. Again, some people were 6 foot something and, you know, very muscular. So they're more likely to get signed to a television company because they look the part. You know, they weren't all that invested. They weren't necessarily, some were not so passionate about wrestling. They just looked at it as like, oh, let's give it a shot and try and get signed to television. So the lifestyle it varied depending who you were. For someone like me, I dove in head first. I had to, because I was crap. So I had to just keep at it and keep training until I could improve and be at a better standard.
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Brutal honesty. I mean, you know, that you put across, but I admire that a great deal. So, okay, so going back to what we were saying earlier about the holiday camps and what have you, you started to have some success there. You started to get some positive feedback from there. Let's go forward in time a little bit further. I mean, because by this point you were achieving the dream, right? So at this point you must have been feeling pretty good, because you know what you'd hoped for all those years was coming to fruition. Taking that a little bit forward, but you know, to the time where you were getting into the groove. You mentioned that you were getting people emotionally invested. You were getting good crowd feedback. Um, where did you go from there? Did you start feeling more sort of wholly comfortable in the role that you were portraying, in what you were doing? Really just to get a feel for what was going through your head at that point in time, as well as any highlights that stand out for you, any specific highlights of particular matches or particular locations that stand out at that time as well, please.
So yes, I did feel very good after the Pontins run. They were mostly a very generous audience, mostly not as noisy and as supportive in the Pakefield ones, but every other one, Prestatyn, I won't bother to list them. But yes, I did feel good in a sense, but I still wasn't entirely comfortable if, say, I got in a situation or an environment where they weren't so receptive or supportive. So it was a mixture. It was like partly, yes, I was satisfied with myself. I didn't get tired. I loved improving, not just at wrestling in the ring, but putting up and taking down the ring. The fact that I got much better at it and was able to be a useful hand, I took a lot of pride in, and I never got tired. You know, we'd for me, it was just I was always on a high of okay, good, I'm improving. But in terms of more difficult audiences, I did just one example. I did one holiday camp in Bognor Regis where they weren't really going for me at the time. I wore all pink, and this was just this holiday camp in Bognor Regis that wasn't really working out, and I completely funked it. And I mean, you live and you learn. I remember discussing it with my trainer at the time, saying, "Oh, they weren't good. That they weren't receptive to me. They just don't like me because they're from Bognor Regis." And he said to me, "No, you didn't work hard enough. You needed to come out and you need to command it. You need to have a confidence in yourself where you command that they support you, and then they will support you." And he was right. It was a good lesson to learn. And don't blame the audience for not being receptive to you. You need to work hard at, as he said. I mean, it was a live and learn moment. You had to put your ego aside and say, "Oh, it's not them, it's you. You didn't work hard enough." Most likely, I agree with him on that occasion. Looking back at it, I wasn't confident enough, and learn the hard way. You go out there. Again, I had nerves and anxiety, and I'm trying to start chants for myself, and I'm crapping myself here. I'm like, peace, 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 and of course, people are not going to cheer along with that. That's it was a good lesson to learn. Yeah, you need to have the confidence in yourself and command it. Now, if I do a G up, I'm most likely to get a reaction, but if I don't, it's fine because I'm focused on my opponent or whatever. I'm focused on wrestling my opponent. If they're not cheering, they're not cheering. Back to the wrestling. Whereas before, I'd be like, "Oh, please cheer for me," and if they didn't, you could see see how defeated I looked. So there was still a lot to learn, but yes, it was a good start in some respects. Again, that was a generous holiday camp audience, easy work. So I still wouldn't say I was qualified to wrestle in front of, a harder audience. But there we go. More to learn right there.
Absolutely. I love the process of growth and sort of development that we're going through here. That is amazing. I'd also like to talk about, as soon as you touched on it there, about the sort of persona aspect and things of that nature. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning with this, you'll have to fill me in on some details. But when it comes to creating that, when it comes to, as you mentioned just now, being on stage and having the confidence in that character, in that persona. I know that this might be a little bit of an abstract question, but I'm curious as to how you develop that. I mean, first of all, how you came up with it in the first place, but also how you develop that to feel totally confident, totally at ease in that sort of second skin, if you like, for want of a better term, in that piece persona, which is a fantastic persona, by the way. I mean, even on here when we were getting started and your screen was cutting out and it has the screensaver, I mean, I love the look and the feel and everything. But essentially the question is how you cultivated that, really, in a simple way, really. That's the question.
Yeah, very good question. It started as just trying to be different. So it was like what I was brainstorming, what hasn't been done in wrestling. And then I thought, well, what about a hippie that's all about peace and love? This is before, I can't remember his name. He was known as the Moonchild on NXT. CJ Parker, I think it was. This is before he did his thing, which came about moments later. But at first, it was just a brainstorming of what stands out and what's different. And I was speaking with, at the time, the trainer at the WrestleForce Academy in Harlow. And when we were talking about it, I said, I'm thinking about, he asked a question, think of a unique gimmick. And I said, okay, someone who's like a hippie who's into peace and love. And he went, that's it, peace, just peace. That's it. Your name should just be Peace. So it was like working off of that. Now, initially, there were camp undertones, sort of flamboyant, which I just wasn't very good at. And there was an attempt to do comedy, sort of being airy, stoned, hippie cliches of that sort, and it just wasn't quite working. Like I mentioned, I went to Bognor Regis in complete pink. So then I just tweaked it a little bit. There's a fella who called Cassius the Neon Explosion, who shortly around this time started to train also, and he was just way better at the whole flamboyance and campness. So it was like, right, forget being that, because he completely outdoes you in every way. So I tweaked it to more of just like, okay, well, bright colors, keep it pink, but have a bit of green as well. So pink and green and a jacket. I'm not a hippie in any kind of way now. I'm not a stoner. I'm just a nice guy, really. My thing is that I'm just a nice, pleasant guy who high fives every member of the audience. So it's so, and I was just better at that just from doing it. It was like I'm much more comfortable this way. And then it was initially just Peace. A couple of promoters said they didn't like just having a one-name wrestler, so they called me Oliver Peace or Ollie Peace. And then as Ollie Peace, of course, you have the Ollie, 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 oi, oi, oi crowd interaction, and that really took off. So that's sort of how we got to where I am now.
Amazing. That's an incredible insight into that sort of character development and how you again went through the process of that. So amazing. So another thing here, obviously we've talked about those early years and we've talked about some of your growth through that time. But I believe you said at the beginning it's been 10 years now that you've been doing this. If I heard that correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. But I'd like to get some of your thoughts on some of your favorite moments because and I know this is a pretty big question, so my apologies, but we've heard about some of the situations where you um, lived and learned and things didn't exactly go to plan and what have you. But in terms of some of your favorites um, matches, some of your favorite audiences, I mean, I don't mind exactly which path we go down with this, but just basically some of your favorite moments in wrestling. And I know it's a big question with at least 10 years worth of moments, but are there any that stand out to you as being particularly special in any way?
Where should I start? I suppose doing a cage match that was in Rushden, doing a tables, ladders, and chairs match, being put through a table there. Um, yeah, that was really something because obviously I grew up watching the TLC matches, Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudleys. More recently, having a hand in training people, then wrestling those people. So most recently, we did a triple threat at Rayleigh. I've wrestled Kieran Lacey and Mark True many, many times, and Josh Breen as well, and Danny Haynes. But Mark True and Kieran Lacey, they started training about 5 or 6 years ago, and I had a lot of a hand in their training. And so we did a triple threat recently at the Rayleigh Mill, and that was a great moment because not only was it the two guys who I've trained and trained with, but we did a really nice triple threat match where we kept integrating, all three of us at one time. I thought we did a very nice job with that, though I say so myself. So yeah.
Those are a few highlights. Well, amazing, because I know it's a big question to ask of you, but it's something that I know we've been going through linear time up until a point, but when we start moving around in time, it's great fun in a different way because your highlights is a big question. What about any audiences or locations that stand out for you? And it's not none of this is to do with sort of playing favorites. I'm sure you've had many great crowds, but I'd be curious to get your thoughts on like some of the favorite places that wrestling has taken you in terms of the location, in terms of the crowd, in terms of the feedback that you got, or anything else that stands out from the trip itself. And again, I know it's a slightly abstract perception of it, but that's something else that must be very cool about the job is you get to travel around, meet different people, see different crowds and interact with them. So again, the highlights of that, is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe one, maybe more than one, something like that?
Uh, Almost all of them really. Like the trip around Pontins, it's kind of like a reverse J on the England map. Trip to Wales and Cornwall. It was John Fowler's holiday camps in Cornwall and Plymouth. That was great. Completely different culture, and that down there. I've enjoyed being in Tamworth years when we did Tamworth. I enjoyed going to Aylesbury and back. Enjoyed Worthing a lot as well. It's none really stand out. Although if they do, it's not by much because audiences by and large are very nice, very pleasant, and make a lot of noise wherever we seem to go.
Absolutely, that's cool. I thought you might say that, to be honest, because even from videos I've seen of you wrestling and things like that, there's always a nice sort of vibe there, if you like, for want of a better term. But I was just curious as to that. So fantastic. So another couple of things with this to hone in on here as well. And again, this is where I said about not being an expert on this, so you'll have to fill me in on some details here. But in terms of your ongoing training and in terms of how that has developed over the years, I mean, I know we talked about the London School and we talked about some of that early time. Um, let's talk a little bit more about that. I mean, obviously that side of it's got easier for you. I'd be curious to know a bit more about how you train for some of the moves you mentioned, like going through tables and things like that, because I honestly don't know. I mean, I see it like anyone else sees it from the outside looking in, but what goes on behind the scenes in terms of preparation. But really, the simplest version of the question is just how your daily routine of preparation has evolved over the years. And this is something else that's behind the scenes that I think people don't see unless they're involved in wrestling themselves. So they'll find it hopefully interesting. So can you shed some light on that for us, please?
Yeah, certainly. There's no way of training to go through a table. You just have to go through it if you're unfortunate enough to be being put through one. Yeah. But in terms of looking
You're
after
winging it.
myself as
Sorry, I don't mean to cut in. So when you go through a table, you're winging it. You're figuring out as you go. Then is that right?
I won't.
Don't give anything away that people might be able to use. But it sounds okay. It sounds like you're. Wow. Okay. A lot of respect for that. Sorry. Carry on with what you were saying in terms of the other aspects. I apologize for cutting in there. I was just amazed. Carry on, please, with your regime.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, in terms of just general wear and tear, you expect your body's going to be battered because you're taking all these bumps. You're getting slammed onto. In case you don't know, it's similar to a boxing ring. It's just got a little more give because it's not attached to the floor. But you're talking about metal beams, plywood, and a little bit of padding. So yeah, I mean, I stretch, try and keep my flexibility in check, do a lot of stretches, get a sports massage once a week, go to the gym, lift weights for strength, run for cardio. Again, when you're in the ring, if you can set a ring up, which I have done sometimes in my back garden, I set the ring up there. If I go through a long period where I'm not on shows able to get in the ring, but you can do stuff like running the ropes, jumping off the ropes, just to stay ring fit, as we call it, because it's very hard to sort of mimic the style. You can do burpees, push-ups, but nothing quite. You intuitively you think, oh, running the ropes and doing a drop down and getting up to do a drop kick, that's just like a burpee, right? That's a similar cardio. Intuitively you'd think that, and I'm sure it helps, but during the lockdown I did a lot of that to stay in shape, but when I got back in the ring, it must be a different sort of cardio, because doing the stuff in the ring was very tiring, having had a long break from being in the ring.
Yeah. Amazing insight into it behind the scenes as well. So that is actually fascinating. Okay, so we've talked about some of your sort of proudest moments, favorite moments, whatever you'd like to call it, and I think that's a good way of sort of condensing so many years into, because I was thinking, well, how do we go through 10 years worth of stuff in linear time? And that's a good thing. But when it comes to what you'd like to do from here, and when it comes to what's lighting your fire, what you're sort of aiming for, obviously you're living the dream by the sound of it, obviously, and you're enjoying the process. When you have sort of accomplished a great deal as you have, when you've sort of been um, around the track a few times, if that's the right term for it. What sort of inspires you? I mean, obviously you still love wrestling and you're very passionate about it. And even when I'm talking to you now, your eyes sort of light up with, with that passion. But in terms of sort of the future dreams and goals and things you'd like to achieve, what comes to mind for that? Again, I know it's a big question. That seems to be the theme of the evening. But in terms of what you'd like to do in the future, please share with us a little bit about that. Thank you.
More of the same. Get even more fans, appear to an even broader audience, have even more audience in the venues we go to, be in bigger venues, also filled out with more of an audience, get more views on YouTube. We're doing WrestleForce TV with WrestleForce. That's going fairly well. Got about 2,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. I've mentioned them. Kieran Lacey and Mark Chu had great matches with the two of them and many others on WrestleForce TV. Again, stay tuned for our triple threat. Should be uploaded in about 3 weeks. In the meantime, I've got a series of matches I have with Kieran Lacey, which I'm very proud of. That's WrestleForce TV right here on YouTube. And yeah, I'm happy with the work. Obviously, I'm still getting better at it and still wanting to be even better, but the work as it is, I'm rather happy with, and I'd love more people to see it. So just keep hustling.
Absolutely, that's the best way. Keep hustling, keep grinding, and getting bigger and bigger. So amazing. So moving into the last couple of things now, for people's sort of attention spans, you know what that's like, all too well, I'd imagine. Anyway, moving into the last couple of things. Obviously, as I mentioned to you when we set this up, a big part of this is inspiration, and a message of positivity for people, and we've really tick that box today, actually, and then some. But if someone were to approach you and say, okay, I want to do well in wrestling, or I want to proceed with this, or even if, because you're an influential figure, somebody approached you and said, I actually have a big dream to accomplish something, and it might not be specifically related to wrestling, but related to another life area. I'd be interested to get your advice. Now, to precursor this, I understand everyone's different, and I understand that it won't necessarily be the same for all people. So just to precursor it with that, and as you mentioned at the beginning, some people are natural, some people are not. People have all different ways of being, and a process they go through. But still, broadly, I think because you are a person who has achieved your dream and you are continuing to do so, and because you've pushed through some of what you pushed through with the anxiety and different things to get there, I think you're in a good place to possibly give a little bit of that advice on somebody who wants to achieve something big. So forgive the wobbling question, but I just wanted to give the context to why I'm actually asking that. With that being said, what would your thoughts be on that topic of advice and of giving some knowledge back, really?
I suppose a happy medium. Don't be too nervous that you, as I mentioned before, you undermine yourself, you psych yourself out needlessly, but don't be so confident that you're careless. So happy medium, find the medium. For wrestling, take it seriously, train regularly, tan, look good, perform good, take a look in the mirror and look at, what do you see? How could it work for you in wrestling? If you're a small guy, don't be a power lifter or a big heavyweight. Try and be a big heavyweight. And if you're a big, huge guy, and you don't have the agility, then don't do high flying maneuvers. The amount of times I see people with all the goods, but they're just, they're too big and they're trying to do these moves they can't do, or they're, small and they're trying to do all these power moves. Look in the mirror and use the tools that you have in wrestling. Obviously, if you're a shorter guy, you might not necessarily be able to be that big, serious, heavyweight power move guy. But some people who don't have those tools, they make it work for themselves. Some people go down a slightly more self-deprecating comedy route, but it works for them. So yeah, in addition to taking it seriously, doing the tanning, the training, honing your craft, look at the tools that you have and work with those.
Absolutely. Well, there's some fantastic advice there, which I love, and I know I've asked some big, or not so much big questions, but very sort of open-ended, broad questions this evening. But it's great because obviously I love some of the thoughts that you have and some of the ideas, and fantastic answer. Thank you once again for anyone listening. It's applicable to any life area, whatever you're aiming for with the first one. Second phase of that, fantastic advice for anyone who wants to succeed in wrestling. So I'm very, very happy with that. Moving into the final phase of this, really, you mentioned earlier about the fans. You mentioned about social media and about growing your audience and everything? This is a fairly obvious question because you're not a hard man to find. But for anyone who does want to know, where can they find you? How can they reach out? How can they get involved? How can they subscribe? All of that good stuff, basically.
Well, you opened up a can of worms because I'm going to plug everything now. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I'm Peace the Wrestler. YouTube, I'm Peace the Wrestler. But I'd far more advise you to subscribe to the WrestleForce TV channel that I already plugged. WrestleForce is the main company I wrestle for. WrestleForce on Facebook. That handle is actually WrestleForce UK. If you want to get involved in wrestling, there's no longer a school at WrestleForce, but there is one in Seven Sisters, I think, London School of Wrestling, and Catch 22 in Gravesend. That's the two I know of that come to my mind. If you're in Wales, there is that's the name of the company, not the school. The All Stars Pro Wrestling is one, and the one run by Brendan White. I'm sorry I couldn't say it, but you know what? It's the internet age. Just Google wrestling training and your location if you're interested in getting into wrestling.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you gave a few of those plugs there. Obviously for the schools and the companies, but also for yourself as well, because that way people can reach out, ask questions, and just basically get in touch. So I'm very, very happy with that. I mean, really, the last thing for me to do is to say thank you for your time and thank you for sharing everything you've shared. Thank you for being an open book, especially regarding some of the things that are a little bit more personal outside of your actual, the nitty gritty of your wrestling life. And I've enjoyed this. I hope you have as well. And just, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. A real pleasure.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.